Good evening. My name is Cynthia Demise, and I'm the project manager for the new Pride Agenda. Thank you so much for joining us. The origins of the new Pride Agenda come as a result of the dissolution of the former Empire State Pride Agenda. And many of us activists from different parts of the state felt that there was considerable work still to be done, particularly on those that are the most underserved: transgender, nonconforming, non-binary, and intersections of the different populations, many people of color. And so we were prepared to start again in a different way and a different focus. And our focus is entirely advocacy and education. We are not a service organization. We are in service of you, the community, about how we could affect budgets, laws, regulations, and culture. We have begun with, we've only been a year in this business, and we have begun with some success. We had probably 20 or 25 meetings with leadership in Albany through the fall to try to move funding for transgender gender implementation. Those of us who have been some former lobbyists, et cetera, know the joy of passing legislation, but without a cultural change and a regulatory assistance and enforcement, as we're all facing in a variety of areas, appropriate enforcement, it could be a challenge. And we're pleased to report that the governor did, in his executive budget, put in mandated training for 340,000 state employees. We began work in developing more innovative, interactive program modules regarding PrEP and other areas. And we were about to launch all those originally starting in New York City and then upstate, and COVID hit. And so we immediately pivoted in about the third week of March to change entirely our programming. And since the beginning of April, have done at least 2 virtual town halls a month, focusing on COVID, sexual wellness, moving into immigration, Black Lives Matter, racial justice, income inequality, etc. We are pleased to get to the punchline. We are so pleased to begin our upstate focus tonight, as we had intended to do for quite a while. Assembly Member Harry Bronson hosted us, and 50 or 60 people came to the event last fall. We promised to come back. We apologize for not being able to do that kind of travel again, but we are going to continue to begin to pay attention of upstate needs, and are thrilled to have Victor Sanchez as our board member representing Rochester. So thank you all for joining us. I'm here to take notes and learn about local concerns and local issues, and then we'll push the envelope, I assure you, where we can. Thank you very kindly. Ahmed?
Awesome. Thank you, Cynthia. My name is Ahmed Mohammed. I'm a community organizer with the New Pride Agenda. Tonight, I'll go over a few logistic notes, and then I'll pass it over to Victor, who's going to be our moderator. So we hope this is as interactive as possible, and to encourage that, we suggest you put your screen in gallery view. You can do that by clicking a button at the top right corner of your screen. Sort of a Brady Bunch style, you'll see all the beautiful faces at the same time. We also, in the spirit of being interactive, encourage you guys asking questions in the Q&A function along the bottom of the screen. And if you don't have a question but a comment, please also suggest your comment in the chat function at the bottom of the screen. I'll be posting my number in the chat function in case you run into any technical difficulties. I'm one text away. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Victor, because this is a stellar lineup and I want to get to the meat of the conversation. Enjoy, everyone.
Hi, thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Ahmed. As they introduced me, my name is Victor Sanchez. I live in Rochester now, but I grew up in White Plains, New York, right outside New York City. So definitely statewide is something that has been on my mind for a long time. When I first learned about the new Pride Agenda, I was definitely very gravitated towards it on the focus in the intersections of people of color and trans women and trans men and gender nonconforming people, and how they wanted to kind of see that work forward. And I am so excited about the panel that we have today. I am lucky to know several of you and lucky to be able to work with you in different forms. So I'm not going to hold this up any longer. So I'm going to call on everybody on the panel alphabetically. So you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the organization that you're kind of speaking for today and or some of the other work that you're doing. And if you would like, please share your pronouns. So Brae, want to start us off?
Sure. I'm Brae Adams. I use she, her, and hers pronouns. I am here in a dual role. Number one, I am the pastor at Open Arms Metropolitan Community Church. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the religious life of LGBTQ folks in the upstate, and then I'm a co-chair and co-founder of Rainbow Seniors Rock, which is a group that we created for senior folks in the absence of a group that had already been existing that had went under a little bit due to COVID. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And Brae and I also work together in HRC of Western New York, Central New York chapter. So Assembly Member Harry Bronson, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Victor, and thank you to all the panelists who are here. This is a pretty good panelist. So I am Harry Bronson, New York State Assembly member. I'm in my 10th year of service to the wonderful people of the greater Rochester area, and I am the only openly gay state legislator outside of New York City, and somebody who wants to change that drastically. We need more voices, and we need more diverse voices from our LGBTQ plus community. I'm glad to be here and look forward to our conversation back and forth.
Thank you. Jonathan Jordan of Trillium and the MOCHA Center.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Jordan. I use all pronouns. I am manager of MOCHA Rochester. I've been with Trillium Health for almost 9 years. And most community members will probably know me as Kyla Minks. So I have a dual role as well. One is a loudmouth and one is a professional. And then a professional loudmouth.
We hope to hear both sides of that. Susanna Speed of Trillium Health.
Hi, I'm Susanna Speed. I'm the Director of Program Education and Linkage to Care at Trillium Health. So Trillium Health, for those who don't know, we strive to provide extraordinary care, affordable care to populations in need, especially the LGBTQ community. So we're very committed to serving the community. And I warn my panelists, but I'll warn everybody else. My wife is putting down our toddler during this meeting, so I apologize if she interrupts.
That is a new reality of the way that we're interacting with people now. So all good. And last but certainly not least is Williamson, who has multiple hats, but one of them is a new startup that she just started. So please tell us.
Hi everyone, my name is Zariah Williamson. My pronouns are she, hers, and hers, and I am here on multiple hats. My first hat will be the SafeZone Initiative, which is a LGBTQ plus consulting firm that helps educate, empower, and celebrate everyone's differences and make it very inclusive spaces for all work, colleges, and organizations as well. I'm also a trans woman, so I'm here as a trans Black woman to talk about my personal story and kind of what the trans Black and brown folks may need. Also, I am an activist here in Rochester, New York for Black Lives Matter.
Thank you. So this is definitely a broad panel, and I wanted to kind of start off these conversations in just touching the different issues that we see within our community, but definitely not going to be the last conversation that we have. And I hope to kind of bring a lot of you back to dig a little deeper into some of these conversations that we're having. So first off, with a lot of the summer protests that we have seen, which I'm sure is kind of the main thing on a lot of people's minds, especially after the in Rochester. And with, Rochester has been very lucky to have a lot of LGBTQ folk in the forefront of this movement. So I just want to, I want to touch upon the experiences of how the community has come together in the protest, and also how is the LGBTQ voice being focused in the protests here in Rochester. And I want to start out with Zariah on this one.
Yeah, so the voices of Black and brown folks during the movement, right? So, and how their voices have been heard. We talk about all Black Lives Matter. So we talk about, that means Black trans women, that means Black bisexual individuals, right? So we really break that down to what that means. And the Rochester BLM movement is ran by women of color and queer individuals who are also people of color. So it's really voice and driven to really talk about the inclusion and talk about what we need and what we want, right? And making sure that our voices are heard and making sure that we're representing everyone. And that's the most important thing that we really strive to work on. And I definitely will say that it has been very hard to do sometimes in a very world that we live in, but it's quite amazing when you can hear those voices.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a second part of the question that I did not.
Yeah. How has your experience been of the community like coming together for this movement?
Yeah. So the community have been amazing. We have accomplices and allies coming out. There's so many religious and spiritual leaders coming out to donate time. And it's not about what you give, it's about being there for the movement and making sure that you are part of it in any way. There's 1,000 ways to be part of it. It's not always being on the front line. There's about things like our street medics. There's about safe places when the cops attack us, right? So the community have been coming together. We just did a sleepover at City Hall and we had so many accomplices buy tents and sleeping bags and just be there. We feed our individuals all day long. We normally do a meal every 2 hours, some snacks, and we have those dropped off. So the community has really stepped up a lot for the lack of resources that we have. Because during COVID, we lost so many resources and the organizations weren't able to pick up what we need as Black and brown individuals. So the community, the people filled that void.
Thank you. And Brae, I know that you have attended some of the protests as well and been part of the movement as well. What has been your experience?
You know, what's been great has been seeing people of all shades, every kind of melanin there is, standing out and standing up and surrounding our Black and brown siblings. One of the things that's been really remarkable is feeling like no matter how you're helping, it's appreciated. I can't tell you, I show up in my clergy collar and I do that very deliberately for two reasons. Number one, and the most important reason is I always wear my rainbow clergy collar when I go because I want it to be clear that I'm supporting the movement and I'm especially supporting our rainbow sisters and brothers. So that's huge. And then the other thing is just to stand up and to surround our siblings who have been so mistreated and who have struggled so mightily, and just to stand with them and just say, we are here and we're not going anywhere. My partner and I have spent as many nights as we possibly can until we're falling over. We have a new puppy, so sleep is not the best thing right now, but we've been spending as much time as possible, and we try to remain not quiet, like in the way that like we're not shouting the slogans and all that, but quiet in that we just want to be sure that we're amplifying these voices that have been quiet, have been pushed down and made quiet for so long. I'm very fortunate to belong to a group of emotional support individuals. We wear orange bands. We now have orange masks that we wear. And so if somebody's having a hard time, it's wonderful to just be able to go and stand with. And, you know, I'm a preacher, so I can't get out without a little illustration. We had one night we were standing literally along barricades at the public safety building, and there was a young man who stood next to me, and I just simply asked, can I stand here with you? And we stood together for about an hour, hour and a half. Neither one of us spoke. We just stood there together, and we were a part of that movement together. And that's what it's all about, especially for those of us who have white privilege, is to stand alongside and to do our best to support and be an ally.
Yeah, the outpour of support has definitely been visible. In the times that I've been there, it's like so empowering to see the amount of people that have shown up And it was even extra powerful, like after what happened in Rochester and the death of Daniel Prude, and that kind of sparked, a bigger fire. And then seeing some people come together in New York City. And like I said, where, a lot of our board members and staff are in New York City. So I know a lot of them attended the protest. Everybody in NPA has been very supportive of this and, attending as much of the protest as possible. So it's been really, really powerful. Harry or anybody else like to share some of your thoughts?
Sure. First of all, I want to publicly thank Zariah. I was there on Labor Day, and I did not realize that you were part of the leadership team on this. And to be and I'm getting goosebumps right now, to be marching and you're running through and saying shields up front, and and just really marshaling all the bodies that are there. And speaking of the bodies, Harvey Milk in the 70s put together a coalition for the then gay movement. And in actuality, every human rights movement in our country, whether you're talking the abolitionist movement to the civil rights movement, you're talking Seneca Falls to Stonewall, has always been a coalition of diverse people. And that's what I see on the streets of Rochester, led by people of color, appropriately so, but allies from all sectors of our community are there. And the other observation I would say, the young people of color who are there, who out of tragedy, yet another tragedy, another Black or brown person killed at the hands of law enforcement. Those tragic deaths, but it has led young people like you and others to find your voice and be there to say enough is enough. It's time for change, systemic change, and holding people accountable. We're in a moment of time, and you have seized upon that moment of time, and everyone else who's there has seized upon that moment of time. My role as a state legislator is to see what I can do as a policymaker to move us closer to equity, the ideal that we strive for. And I've had conversations with the leadership, the protest leadership, on what we can do in connection with mental health, what we can do to dismantle the framework of policing, which is really based on slave patrols. I mean, that's where it comes from, and what we can do to move us forward. And so this is a very scary time. Creates a lot of anxiety. It creates a lot of fear, but at the same time, there's a lot of hope. And I have hope because of the young voices that are on those streets of Rochester every single night. Since I believe it was September 2nd when the news of the death of Mr. Prude came to light. So thank you.
Yeah, and Harry, you kind of segue into my next question very, very nicely. We all know that kind of right now we want change because it's been far too long, and it definitely has taken some time, and it will take some time to kind of get things right. And one of the immediate things that came from it, thanks to the help of a lot of the protesters, was the repeal of 50A, which a lot of NPA as well as many other organizations kind of helped support that in a statewide level to make sure that took place. But what are some other aspirations that you see as immediate action that needs to be taken to help reform the policing, and how do we continue this movement after the summer, in the cold winter months that people, it becomes harder and harder to stay out in the streets? And Zariah, do you want to start off with that one?
All right. So I don't think that currently right now that the police department, our Rochester RPD can be reformed. I think we've been talking about it for a really long time. And I think they're doing what they want right now. The leadership is just so unmental. I was arrested yesterday and got out, but they didn't know what to do with me. They were just sending folks all over the place. Right now, I don't think we can be reformed. What I think what we need to do is really get those mental health workers in there to be able to take over those calls and completely abolish, right? And then rebuild. A lot of places and states have police on the outskirts, but have people like gatekeeper and safety keepers, individuals that respond to certain things. I definitely think that Daniel Law, which talks about mental health, I think a lot of people don't understand that Black and brown bodies have mental health issues and crises, and it's okay. And when someone is having that crisis, or if you're Black and brown, it is okay if you have a mental health crisis. And to be able to acknowledge that, empower yourself that it's going to be okay. These laws and the police, we really need to talk about who are they protecting, right? They are harming, and these individuals are not geared up for pepper bullets and tear gas. But you talk about how this goes back to slavery and slave catchers, right? We talk about how long individuals have been oppressed. So everyone's like, oh, is it peaceful? I believe that you have to agitate to be able to make a difference, right? Every leader that we had that made a difference agitated in a type of way. So we really have to make sure that we're not just like, oh, is it peaceful or this, right? No, sometimes you have to break those barriers to be able to move forward, to say, I am heard and I am valid. Black and brown bodies have been killed, right? And you can't tell individuals who are Black and brown how to grieve, when it's okay for them to matter, right? So once we be able to do that and restructure our police department and get out of it, right? We talk about this reform. What does reform looks like? No one really knows, right? Our mayor doesn't even know what reform looks like, right? Or even out here protecting. She has a voice of how they treat us, and she makes a conscious decision every night that she goes to bed what not to do. And this is every legislation, this is every leader making that decision. There are some out there, which is great, but there are many people in City Hall that has these opportunities to voice up and be at the table. A lot of Black and brown individuals are not at that table. So if you are a white ally or accomplice, I like to call it, make room for people who are Black and brown to be able to make these decisions.
And if I can just add, just for a second, I was raised to believe that the police are your friend, right? White privilege again, and I'm acknowledging and clear on that. But, and I always sort of had them in some measure of benign dictatorship or something. I don't know what the right word is. The behavior that I've seen from the Rochester Police Department in the last 15 days has been nothing short of barbaric. The way they have treated the people who pay their salaries. We paid for the tear gas they shot at our faces. It is reprehensible. There is no redeeming factor that I can find in the Rochester Police Department. I'm sure there are nice individuals there somewhere, but I haven't found them. And I sure haven't seen them in their dead eyes, because I stare at them night after night as we stand toe to toe, separated by barriers and their ability to beat the crap out of me with whatever stick they have in their hands. But I stand there and I look at their eyes and I try to find their humanity. And right now we have created a system in which they cannot be human. And there has to be change.
Well, Brae, I would just add, I mean, you just said you're trying to find their humanity. The problem with the police blueprint that exists in our country and which was built on the slave patrols is that they don't see the humanity of the Black and brown bodies that they're policing.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, they don't see the humanity. They don't see the dignity that's inherent in every one of us. And so I think when folks talk about reform isn't going to do it, that's what they're talking about. We have to break down that blueprint. We have to defund and refund, right? So let's move money away from militarizing our police forces and move that money into investments in the environment, in our neighborhoods, right? And And then, you know, to have policing, I mean, I don't think anybody's saying we don't need policing. We do. But what we need is policing that has some humanity to it. Some policing where people are recognizing the dignity of the folks that they're encountering. And right now, with the systemic racism that has existed in this country for hundreds of years, and having law enforcement built on how do we capture the slaves again and control the slaves, how do we move that into a law enforcement that has some humanity, and then also how do we have crisis intervention that is intervention with compassion and caring and meeting the needs of the mental health person that you're encountering, and that has to be separate from law enforcement.
Yeah, Jonathan and Susanna, like mental health has been one of the things that's been mentioned a couple of times in health in general. What are some of the things that you're hearing from the people you interact with through the MOCHA Center in Trillium?
I mean, we know that LGBT people, especially communities of color, already, minus a pandemic, minus these social movements, are already experiencing things like homelessness, depression, substance use at higher rates already as a baseline. So at this point, I mean, I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of the trauma. I think that this is gonna echo for years. I think that we're gonna see our homelessness rates like through the roof. People, if you don't have a job, you can't feed yourself, you can't find a home. And unfortunately, there are not enough mental health services that are accessible to people. I mean, they're out there, sure, but okay, you know, how accessible are you? Do you have sliding fees? Do you take Medicaid? Things like that. You know, we don't have enough of that. We need more of that. And something that I wanted to add to what Harry and Zariah were saying is, you know, we can't have this conversation until we talk about the narrative that's being shared, right? So I don't think that we can have any kind of movement forward until there's education around what exactly it means to change the culture of policing, right? So, and how are news outlets reporting that? How are we educating future generations about what that means? Because I don't see any way to move forward until we address those things as well.
Jonathan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Very little, because everyone's covering it. But I just know when I talk to my staff and other folks, it's basically what Zariah was saying is there's no reforming the police. Like, nobody trusts them as it is. There's no use calling for them. And I think that what we're seeing when we're seeing them in their riot gear, when we're seeing them in the streets, is an army of what is seen individually every day. That abuse of power, that fear. But it's just right now it's huge, whereas it's happening all over the city any moment of the day when people call the cops, especially people of color, especially LGBT folks, especially trans folks who might get misgendered or worry more about their safety as opposed to the cops coming to help them. The cops are coming now to find out what part do they play in whatever trauma or whatever reason they're calling for. So now, instead of becoming the innocent individual who needs the help, you're being treated as if you're the offender.
Absolutely. And we talk about a community, right, that is overpopulated with police officers. When we talk about reform, when you go to, if you ever live in the upstate New York and Rochester, when you go to Fairport and Parrington and all these other suburban places, right, they have very limited police, right? The city have an overwhelming amount of police. You are putting triple the cops in one community that is already lacking resources, right? And then you have these cops thinking and the media playing into this black on black crime, which doesn't exist. If you put all race one people in a community with no resources and guns and drugs and other things are going to happen no matter if you black, white, Puerto Rican, Spanish, Asian. If you are marginalized, you are going to retaliate to become that hunger to succeed and to be successful. And we have to really, like Susanna said, break down that media. Who do the media work for? The city, right? So like the news outlets are all pretty much Republican and have a view and a narrative of what they are spinning. So if the police are saying these individuals are thugs, and that's what the media are gonna go in there and view the point. Not the innocent 15 people who are sitting in a line, or that one Black person who's in a wheelchair being arrested and handling and tossed and turned. You can't reform that. How do you reform this trauma that you are constantly being abused? It's a master enslaved thing that we just have to break.
No, you're completely right, Zariah, because the media, it's crazy when I've been out, I've seen what's happening, and then I will go and watch the news and we'll say mob at City Hall, when a mob of people standing and singing and being that's not a mob. But they don't talk about the antagonistic behavior, the threatening way that the police are there. They make it, the news has spun it so badly. And in fact, if you want the real news, you need to be watching Facebook Lives. You need to be watching the people who are sharing it right then and there, because yesterday I was watching it with what was happening here at City Hall, when they sort of ambushed people in the morning while they were still sleeping, when the news reporter, I think they were whatever station, but the way they were wording it, the person who was on live was like, no, don't say it like this. Why would you say it like that? Why wouldn't you say the police are here harassing people who are being peaceful? So it's all in the way that it gets spun, because I mean, people in the suburbs, people who have never been to the city, people who don't understand what's going on, or what the not just the, we were talking about this at work today, that of my team, is that this is not just trauma because of what's been going on, but it's been going on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And this is the 15th week of protesting, going to the 16th week, but now it's really hit home because it's happened here, and we were told over and over again, we're not like that. And then to find out that our leadership, who are people of color, were behind a cover up or not telling the truth is doubly traumatizing for people, because then who can you trust if you can't trust your own people?
Absolutely. And I think, not to spend too much time on this, but the biggest thing that people don't know about the Black Lives Movement is we educate, we empower, and we celebrate. So when we talk about education, we do teach-ins. We learn our history. We learn and get people involved. We also sign people up for voting, right? We had a quartet Bandcom and play Black composers, right? So we talk about the art of being Black in your culture. They don't show that on the news. They don't show that. They write that like rocks are being found, and we're spray painting the street that Black Lives Matter and showing you're artistic, telling people you can occupy City Hall and still do your homework at the same time. There are hundreds, and there are tons of people who come and do their work, right? And also occupy at the same time. So we really do, I think so many times people forget that we really do educate and celebrate and advocate for these individuals. Education is key. We sign people up for voting. Election is up. This is the most important time that people are worried about their seats. And we need to let everyone know that you are the people are the strongest. Mayor Lovely seat is up. There are city council people. Like, this is a time that we move, that if the people, which we are doing, stay strong and diligent, we will control the future.
I think Jonathan brought up a really good point. Something that has come up in the Q&A as well is that, we have leadership of color in Rochester. Yeah, we still see a lot of this extreme policing that's going on, which is really, interesting dynamic to kind of take a look at. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's funny, my wife and I were just talking about that if you were to get, let's say in a utopia, every single person that is not racist, doesn't harbor any ill will because of the color of your skin, we would still have racist policies because it's systemic, right? It doesn't matter who's in charge when you have laws, when you have policies, when you have like things written into federal law that prevent people from seeking justice, or make it so that we have school to prison pipelines. And so, you could have the most perfect group of people. It wouldn't matter because the system is set up for Black and brown people to fail.
And the other aspect of it is racism is built on power and control. And so there are folks who get into positions who desire power and control, and it trumps the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm. I've heard
Don't say Trump.
Yeah, right. Well, I've heard people say skin folk ain't kinfolk, right?
Not all skin folks are kin folks. And that
Yeah,
just,
I was trying to get it right.
yes, you're really close. You keep coming. Look, but that just means like not all Black and brown folks, and I say folks because all genders don't agree on the same. I mean, we have Candace Owens, like let's really talk about that, right? And she is a Black and she's a brown individual, but she does not really, she doesn't care about the Black Lives movements. We have Mayor Lovely Warner, right? She is a Black woman, and she, let's remind everyone, she was elected because of the people, right? So a lot of individuals go on this like, oh, I'm gonna do this for the community, and when the people vote you, you start changing politician-wise because you're trying to get closer to Albany, which will get you closer to DC, right? So like they think of the long game, but they forget about who they're hurting, and the community is suffering more from them thinking of long-term instead of where you are now.
Right.
You are so right. I know this is gonna come up later, but I know there was a like a representation question that's gonna come up. But I think that it starts with education. Like, we're not really taught how the system works. And we're not taught how the system is broken because it's so hidden and we just accept it. Like, I mean, let's take the election this year. We have Trump and Biden, two pretty terrible people, but now we have to pick who's the least terrible person, or we think we'll do the least terrible things in the 4 years that they have. But it all starts locally. Like, we're a city. We have townships and things like that. I don't know. Clearly I didn't learn what I'm talking about. But you know what I mean? Like we have small, what Zariah was saying, people start small, but they have higher aspects, but they don't, like, there's not enough change that it almost bends them, it breaks them in a way to where that the values that they once held are no longer those values anymore because they become power hungry, or they know in order to move up, they have to play the game, and they never go back to their roots. And I think that part of to tie this all up, since it's got a little messy, but I think that if we're going to make changes, then the generations behind us, we need to teach them what went wrong and how can they fix it? How can they come together? Because as nice it would be for one or two people to get into some positions of power to change things, we need more than that. We need entire communities of folks to back up that one or two person people, to remind them where they came from, to remind them what they stand for, to remind them why they are going into this political field to change things, to make things better, ideally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, sorry.
It's not an accident too that that the schools are funded by property taxes, and property taxes are the situation that has to do with, redlining, right? Because you couldn't get a good price for your house, and you couldn't get a mortgage on your house, so you couldn't afford to live in your house. So then the property values go down, and then that's the money that these slum landlords are using to, that's what they're paying into the system. So the children who are living in those areas then get a subpar education, and it starts there and goes all the way through systemically through every piece of what we are as a community. So it's not just enough to have a couple of people in power. It's not just enough to, fix one part of the system. The whole system has to be, turned on its head if it's ever going to work properly for all of the people.
Right, and we have to understand how intersectionality works with it as well, and remember that, like, not just one thing is going to hold it all together, that we have to recognize everyone has multifacets and is multifaceted, and we have to recognize all of that.
So let's just bring this back to the new Pride agenda and representation, and adding to what Jonathan was saying about representation and remembering, why you're in office. I mean, you were elected, and Zariah said this, I mean, you were elected by the people. I mean, I was elected by the people, and it's my job to represent the people. I can't always do everything that the people want because they want different things sometimes. And so my job is also to be a thought leader and lead us. So for me, you have, if you're going to be an effective elected official, you have to have people elected you because of your core values, because of what you believe in is consistent with what they believe in. And for me, that's believing that no matter who you are, what you look like, who you love, or where you come from, or how you identify, that you have dignity, and with that you deserve full equality, you deserve justice, and you deserve an opportunity to succeed. That's my core value. So everything that I do, I look from a lens, am I making a policy decision that's going to move us closer to equity, or is it going to remove barriers to equity? And if it does one of those two things, then I'm on the right track. Unfortunately, we do have folks who get into elected office and they forget they work for the people. It's their job to represent the people to the best of their ability. And usually the people elected them because of who they are and what they believe in. And so with the new Pride agenda, when they start supporting candidates and things of that nature, but in their other role about advocating for issues, the idea there is, they're going to be pushing for issues that are important to our LGBTQ plus community. And as Jonathan said, in doing that, we have to acknowledge and understand the intersectionality of it all, right? Because we have a very diverse community, and we have to represent the entire community.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down to accountability, right? We have to make sure that we hold people accountable. I mean, unfortunately, a month or so ago, time is a blur now, but we had an incident of a trans man being the hate crime against a trans man. We have to make sure that we held the police accountable, that we had the judicial system accountable, and we had our elected leaders accountable to make sure that it was treated with the fairness that it deserved. I know we could spend a lot of time talking about this, but I do want to move on into another thing that has been impacting many of us, which is COVID-19. And the reason why we had to have this conversation kind of move over into Zoom as opposed to being able to interact in person. New Pride agenda had to start these virtual town halls because we were not able to be out in the community. So this was a way to kind of make that outreach. But in light of COVID-19, how has some of the services needed for healthcare services and other services been offered to the LGBT community? And how do we amplify those efforts? And I'll start off with Suanna and Jonathan, if you want to kind of kick us off with that.
So when COVID hit, I think everyone remembers March 15th or 16th, because that was the day that everyone got sent home. We at Trillium immediately got started working on how can we continue services. And I think within 2 weeks, we were doing at-home kits for testing. We had started video visits. We did everything that we could, and I know that other agencies did, to bring services to people. We knew that social distancing was a thing. I mean, weeks before then, we were telling everyone cough into your elbow, wash your hands constantly. So we had a little bit of a crystal ball. I couldn't think of anything else about how things were going. So we really just amended things. I mean, we even did some construction within our building to create our respiratory evaluation and treatment area, where we relocated folks. I mean, it was really easy when they weren't there, but we took offices and moved them into COVID screening areas that we were able to see people all day, every day in now. We have taken out our mobile access clinic to areas that we've been working with the Department of Health that most need it. We've been doing that. So we have really been using technology and meeting people literally where they're at to our advantage. And now that we've sort of reopened our doors, we're doing appointment-based testing, which is really funny because we never did that before, but it's really convenient for people now. And it's really helping us too, because when you think about it, we want to keep our staff safe too, so we have to control the amount of traffic in and out of the building. I think I've sort of started rambling at some point, but we just did so much, and now like my brain is going on a wild train ride to figure out, being there and realizing how much we evolved so quickly. It's very hard to like sum it up succinctly, but essentially we created ways for people to interact with us from home and meet them in the streets.
Yeah, I think, Jonathan, I literally have almost nothing to add to that because you were so succinct. So thank you. And I want to just reiterate what Jonathan said, that we meet people literally where they are. I mean, we have incredible providers who are providing healthcare to folks from home. We have our COVID testing site, like Jonathan said. There was a need for communities, especially communities of color, to receive healthcare and testing, and we got our mobile access clinic and we went to those neighborhoods because we know that there's a need. So I'm incredibly proud of our organization and our executive leadership and the work that they've done with addressing the needs of the community right now.
And I want to add one thing to that. I know we're talking about COVID now, but now that we've gotten we're a healthcare center, so COVID was what we were really focused on. And now we are in a position now where we are starting to put some of those things that some of those workflows that we made for healthcare into play for supporting the community as far as Black Lives Matters, and making sure that they have supplies and that we're there as an agency for them as well. So COVID really helped us become even better at evolving quickly.
And I know like one of the things that like COVID kind of highlighted for many people, I think things that a lot of us already knew, but it brought to the minds of many other people, was the disparities that exist within the healthcare system, specifically for LGBTQ people and people of color. What have been kind of like your experiences in the community?
Well, I can say that, COVID also strikes, at least previously we believed that it was only striking older people. So if you're older and you're LGBTQ, and maybe you're from a generation in which LGBTQ folks didn't have children, your community probably doesn't live with you. And so, if you're really sick, or if you are in a nursing home, the isolation for folks, and the inability to even know that people were sick to help them, people not having even food and things like that. And so I think things like that going south so quickly made it clear that, our elders need our attention so much more than we had been giving them. We spent a lot of time just calling people. I spent probably the whole month of the second half of March to the second half of April, literally just on the phone calling, our seniors and making sure, do you have what you need? You have food. I know you can't go out, and not everybody can afford a delivery system. Not everybody can, go to, order Grubhub every night or whatever it is. And so people literally, it was food. And to speak from another standpoint, I'm a part of a group called the Rock Salt Center, which is a religious group that's gathered together from various places, but we all are centered in a building that houses the South Wedge Food Program. We're at 500% this year. The South Wedge Food Program is in need and in the ability to take care of people. So, and you can just imagine how many of those folks are members of our Rainbow community. A good percentage of our people are from that community.
So I would say, as a Black trans woman, that like a lot of first, let me take a step back. So as Black and brown folks, if you really think about their job, a lot of it is essential work, right? They work in essential locations, cleaning hospitals and things like that. So the Black and brown community is always more at risk, right? So like when we see the highest spike of COVID, you're like, why are this community, Black and brown folks, are getting getting COVID and not knowing about it, right? Or don't have the resources to stop working, right? What about that one mom who has 2 children and she's a single mom and she has an essential job, right? If she has a little cough, she's not gonna tell no one, right? Because she has to keep feeding for more, right? There's not programs. And this, again, where we talk about the system failing us, right? So even with COVID, the system is failing Black and brown community members and also trans individuals, right? If you are in the middle of transitioning, not all providers are well educated on pronouns or what to ask anonymity wise and like just make you feel safe. It is very hard if you are non-binary, trans, or genderqueer to go to a provider because you are maybe already struggling with your identity, but also some dysphoria, some sort of type. And to have a provider who's not educated during that and blame it on something else or not, or start gatekeeping resources, that is really hard. So we have to also think about that way of how the community, the Black and brown community need these resources. I am part of a mutual aid. So we help with food and rent, and I'm constantly on Facebook asking for things for people who are Black and brown and trans because they don't have the same resources that's available.
I think that definitely kind of leads into the next question. Next topic is that, you know, Rochester community kind of faced another loss recently with our LGBTQ center kind of shifting and having a bit of a roadblock. So, you know, Zariah, I think you touched on a lot of the hardships already, but what are like some other like immediate services that we kind of need to start focusing on to make sure that we bring to the community?
So when this agency closed, they weren't really mindful of how long they've been there and what they provided, right? Just a space for people to go to and know and feel comfortable. I ran the trans group there. It was called T-35 plus T-35. We had a T+35. We had youth groups, right, for trans youth. So we were providing knowledge, right, but a safe place for you to be yourself. When that organization closed and no one picked up that resource, we all felt as a community because these trans kids and people who are coming out in college don't have a space to really go, right? Or know more about the community, right? I remember being in a youth program when I was younger and like seeing successful LGBTQ folks, right? Plus, and then also people who were Black and brown and queer. I was like, whoa, you can be successful and Black? Like, yes, let me get on this level, right? But because when I was a youth, I didn't see that, right? The only time I really saw a trans person was either on Jerry Springer or dead in the newspaper. The average life expectancy of a trans woman of color is 30. That is not something that she is doing wrong. That is us as a community and as a system failing Black and brown trans women. So when that place went away, we lost all these resources. So there's trans folks needing a place to speak. People who are coming out. I used to get a call once a week at this agency of someone coming out and it was like, can I pick up some magazine, right? They don't have that like to-go spot. And a lot of organizations were facing COVID, but they also didn't pick up the ball, right? So Pride passed and tons of places did virtual prides, right? And we did not. So we also did not provide that openness of that someone can go and still be in the closet. So I felt like a lot of the community is left behind and we have to get the ball rolling back on our programs for our trans folks, for our youth, and also for our senior citizens. We used to feed them. We don't know when the next time they're gonna get a meal. So
that's what we're doing.
Yes, yes.
So that's what happened with Rainbow Seniors Rock. You know, a majority of my church congregation had in some way or other been a part of the organization for elders that was taking place at the former group. And there was nothing. There was this huge void. And imagine that this is your social group. This is where you're getting fed. These are the people that you spend time with. These are the people who know your story. These are the people it's safe to be out with. These are the people who you call if you get sick, and all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. And so that's part of the reason that we started Rainbow Seniors Rock, because there was this void, and it was imperative that, especially during the isolation that we're having right now, where we can't even go just out to dinner and feel comfortable, to have that going on. And then all of a sudden the whole bottom drops out. And then the advocacy part, you're exactly right, Zariah. I get a lot of phone calls too, as I'm sure you can imagine, of people who are like, okay, my kid's trans, now what? Right? Or, and I want to be a good parent and I want to support my kid, and I have no idea how to do it, and there's no resources. And then I just want to say one more thing, is that there is this historical value that's been lost as well. The Empty Closet newspaper was the longest continuously running LGBTQ newspaper in the United States, and now it's gone. It's the loss to the community is enormous in historical way as well. We're very fortunate that we still have Evelyn Bailey, who's doing her Shoulders to Stand On project, but much of what was a part of what made Rochester so amazing, and having this open group really was lost in that debacle, whatever you want to call it, and the thing that happened.
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I was just going to say that I know Zariah said that people didn't pick up the ball, but it was almost like the ball was dropped by nobody's means, and then COVID came as somebody went to go grab it and kicked it and like moved it out of the way. And I will say that working at Trillium, there's a fine line. This is gonna sound like excuses, but I mean there's some behind the scenes things that like there's a fine line between whether or not another agency comes in and picks up Pride and does something with it, because there was a lot going on with the Out Alliance and waiting. Is it going to reopen? Is it going to, what's going to happen? So I think there's a level of respect that was there too for the legacy of Out Alliance, that nobody wanted to sort of come in and like step on anyone's toes or see as if they're trying to like take over anything. So while I think that it is terrible, I know that Roar did some virtual Pride things, and there were like little pockets of virtual Pride, which I thought was kind of nice, but also I think that in June people weren't quite ready to be out there and trying to plan something. I think people were still trying to take care of themselves and get their lives together. And I know that at Trillium, we have done some trans support groups through Zoom and things like that. And I think that also there's a little bit of Zoom burnout. That again, it's not excuses. These are literally things that we have heard from people, that like, I'm very happy to see there have been upwards of 40, at least 50 unique individuals in this, but it's becoming a little bit more daunting for people to be like, I have to sign on for another thing, especially I think if they have kids at home and they're also helping them do schoolwork in that way too. So I'm thankful for everyone who's watching. But yeah, I think that everything Zariah was saying was lost, and I think there's some legacy that's lost there. And I think there's a way to bring that back. But I also want to put some emphasis back on the community, that we can offer. I mean, it's a two-way street. We need to ask the community what they want, what is needed right now, because I think that services that are going to be needed within the next, 5 or so years as we recover from this are going to be very unique, and they're not going to look the same as they did before COVID. But I also, again, it's a two-way street, and also community, if we hear from this and we create programming, then we have to, community has to show up and do their part too, to continue we support each other, and is what I'm trying to say. So we need that back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also add that in the absence of the Out Alliance right now, continuing to invest in those LGBT communities of color organizations like Rochester Black Pride, Black Avenue, or Avenue Black Box Theater, like there are definitely organizations that are queer spaces, that are safe places for communities of color who identify as LGBTQ, that we can continue to invest in as a community.
Harry, you want to say something?
I was going to add that, first of all, I do think, as Jonathan said, the community has an obligation here too. And folks have stepped up, what Brae is doing, so your work with the Rainbow Seniors, I'm not sure what you're calling, what are you calling yourselves now, Brae?
With the Rainbow Seniors Rock, RS Rock.
Yeah, Rainbow Seniors Rock. So that is important. Then we have MOCHA, who you're doing your work still, and people can rely on MOCHA. We have Center for Youth. Center for Youth just opened the very first LGBTQ residential home for young LGBTQ plus individuals who are runaway or homeless youth. And, you know, unfortunately, it's only, it's either 6 or 8 beds, I can't remember which, but they have a program, they have a SafeZone program for LGBTQ plus youth to come to. You know, it's not it's not a youth group in and of itself, but there is some support. You know, look, I was involved with the Out Alliance long ago when it was the Gay Alliance, and sat on the board for 6 years, was president for almost 3 of those years. You know, the loss of that is personal for me. You know, I think it like Brae and others said, you know, it's a legacy, it's gone. This was an organization that was around for decades, and you know, had some bad moments, had some good moments, but it was there for our community, and it was a part of our community, and we've lost that. I am committed to try to get something like that back, whether it's you know, a program under a larger organization, or whether it's revamping the Out Alliance, whatever it is, but we need that, and we need it not only because of the services and the programs that it provides. It's an anchor to our culture, and even recognizing that as it was delivering services, it had a lot of difficulties in doing that in a diverse way, and serving in particular our trans community members of color. It still was an anchor, and it would have been better for us to improve that and move forward, but unfortunately it's not here anymore. And so for me, I want to try to get that anchor back in whatever form we can do it, because you know, I'm old enough to remember conversations about not fighting for marriage equality, not fighting for certain rights, because if we did, we would assimilate into the straight world. And if we assimilated, we would lose our culture. So having a community center is a way to hang on and have an anchor to our culture, who we are as in the broad sense, who we are as a gay community. And so, you know, that's why I think we need to get it back.
All right, so we're getting close to time, so I'm gonna give Zariah and then Jonathan the final kind of like last big comments on this.
Yes, thank you. So I just quickly wanted to say I definitely understand COVID happened. Just as a trans woman myself and part of that community, right? We always say it's a two-way street. It is. I definitely agree it's a two-way street. But if you are a trans person of color or a non-binary person of color and you weren't really taught or really know anything about a certain community, they're not really gonna know what they want, right? A lot of individuals, you have to, like, if you're going to be a provider or an organization, right? You kind of have to take the first step to be able to make sure you're making those connections with that community and those individuals and building that. Just because sometimes there's like a trust, and taking that hat off and putting on my business hat, owning the SafeZone initiative with other people. That's what we do. We do education, right? And we're like working with organizations for people to be educated, but also do events. So with our trainings, you're able to get your organization or your school trained, and you sponsor someone in the community, like the Black Box Avenue Theater, and we be able to share personal coming out stories with Black and brown folks, right? So you get to be able to sponsor other organizations that might not have the funds for programs that they might need.
Jonathan?
So without going into too much of a commercial about our new space, MOCHA is moving to West Main. We will be in there in October, and I am very hopeful that a lot of the things that you all are talking about will be what the services that we can provide. It will not just be MOCHA at this space. We will have other programs and other sexual health initiatives, but we'll also be that drop-in center that people were used to on Liberty Pole that maybe got lost a little bit when we moved to Water Street. We're very hopeful that this new, we're going to be at 470 West Main. You can drive by it, it's the building right now. But we are very hopeful that being on that bus lane, on that main road, that more people will feel welcome. And we know that people have some concerns. I'm going to be completely transparent, maybe say too much, knowing that my CEO is watching. But we are, as manager of MOCHA Rochester, I firmly believe that when we move into that neighborhood, we're going to have to form connections with those surrounding businesses. We're going to have to form connections with those people who live in the community, and we're going to have to, Harry, you said, share our experiences and our history, but I think that our history as queer people of color is different than your history, and I think that, no offense, but I think that your history is the one that we hear a lot about, and we need to change that and start hearing more about ours. And I think, and Zariah, like you said, when people are young, they don't know what they want, but I think that they do. And I think that that's part of my job and my staff's job and our job at West Main will be to hear what they want, because I think it evolves as we know. I mean, quick little tangent, like I identify as non-binary, and that's been probably maybe like 2 or 3 years, but that's because I always felt that way and there was never words for it. There's always an evolution in our community, and I think that in this new space we'll be able to, like Harry said, teach our history, be more of mentors, be that thing that Zariah, you were talking about when you were going to youth groups, show people what they can become and show them, help push them into a direction. And also, our Trillium way is make sure they're sexually healthy, but which is a huge aspect too, because we're talking about COVID, we're talking about, transmission, and we want to make sure that people are not, are healthy in all aspects of their life.
Right.
Yes, I agree with you, Samantha Vega, to avoid saying terms like gay community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I personally try to say queer community as much as I can, but I know there's some generations that feel a little hesitation to going down that route. And part of like the big loss to the community was like the COVID hit, and it affected a lot of not-for-profits. And NPA had like this big goal of having a Western New York organizer come to Rochester and help us kind of figure out what were some of the issues that we really want to tackle statewide and help organize the community, which in a way that we've kind of seen happen kind of organically, but even past, this movement comes, what are some of like those issues that, we still need support statewide as we want to see it forward. So that's definitely one of the things that we want to see in a new Pride agenda, and definitely to continue these conversations as we move forward to be able to really understand what are some of the needs of the community. So we're right around time. So I'm just gonna go and see if anybody has, any final thoughts to kind of close out for the evening.
I thought that this was going till 9, so I was prepared for another hour, but.
So, Harry, I know you say this a lot, but like now is the time, folks. Get involved. We need more voices. We need diversity of voices. We need folks like Zariah on the front lines. We need to hear from you. Get involved with, elections, become a representative. I mean, we need to be doing the work at this point. And I think that we're at a time where, I would love to see new and diverse voices at the forefront.
And please, if you're not registered to vote, get registered to vote. Get everyone around you 18 or over to register to vote. Like Susanna said, get involved. I'm not a protest person. I was a couple times I went out, and I'm very happy that as an agency, Trillium we were able to help with supplies, especially with phone chargers. We heard there was a need for phone chargers, so we had like 150 of them, and we're able to give those out. So you don't have to be out there to support. There's so many Venmos that are not in my head right now, but Facebook is well, it's not always wonderful, but it's wonderful in this way to, connect. So yeah, every little bit helps.
I want to say thank you for having me. It was a great conversation. I look forward to more conversations like this in the future. For everyone who's watching, make sure that you get involved, right? We have nothing to lose but our chains, right? It is our freedom and it's our duty to win and fight. So I said that completely backwards, but it is okay because it was powerful. But again, make sure that you know it is your duty to win. Like, you are the people, we are strong together. We are stronger together than divided. And that we really just need to make sure that we're supporting the movement and also the people, because it's not just about like, oh, these people over here, right? They want safety and be treated human. At the end of the day, we're not asking for anything crazy. We're asking for things like humane. So thank you.
So I would just say, first of all, thank you, New Pride Agenda, for doing this. I think it's important for our community to have communications and open dialogue. We have a lot to learn from each other. I would remind people, you know, we're in a moment of time. You know, we have the health crisis. We have a economy that's in free fall, and we are grappling with racial injustice all at the same time. And we will get through this, and we'll get through this better than we are today if we stand by each other, if we support each other, if we care for each other, if we are willing to have open dialogue and be vulnerable with each other and honest with each other. And our truths will come through because I'm a firm believer that with our LGBTQ plus community, we have a heightened understanding of what equity means. And we have it because we are a very diverse community, and we're brought together in that community, and we'll support each other, and in doing so, we'll bring the broader community forward for a brighter future. Thank you.
I just want to say, you guys support each other. Everybody, call the person that you've been thinking about this week. Call the person you haven't talked to in a while. See how everybody's doing, and do your best to stand with those who need to be stood with.
Just saw Evelyn Bailey comment, and I want to agree with her. She says, please document what you do. Without a history, you do not exist. Document, document, document. And I wholeheartedly believe that, because as we were talking about, media will spin things. So we need to make sure that we are telling our stories in the way that they need to be told and not letting someone else speak for us.
Thank you. And there's definitely is a lot of ways to get involved with the movement. Definitely register to vote. Make sure you go out and vote. And one of the things that, you know, is very personal to me is having more LGBTQ people run for public office. And I know that that's one of the topics that's going to be coming up. And I'll turn it over to Cynthia and Ahmed to kind of talk a little bit more about NPA and the upcoming program. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
This was a terrific panel. I'm humbled by hearing the concerns from your Rochester community. And I took so many notes, whether it's, of course, increased focus on mental health and, you know, changing, of course, the police blueprint of how they think about things, on the lack of humanity, understanding media will always be slanted, like Jonathan talked, and, you know, hey, maybe we should start doing something on Facebook Live, you know, at New Pride Agenda, or paying attention to that more. I loved hearing Black Lives Matter advocates, empowers, and celebrates. I think that's a great riff, Zariah. And of course, the whole issue of racist policies and social justice. That is the focus of what we are doing. We are focused on the most underserved communities and racial justice. And I did not know, for example, that the Out Alliance had closed, and there was a shift there. I mean, I'm texting with my lobbyists. It's like, oh my gosh. So we are as we grow. It's just myself working pro bono, and Ahmed is our only full-time person. And when we're gifted to get some money, maybe from the state, it'll be one of you, your community, being the community organizer that's informing the new Pride agenda. It's not us bringing someone to you. You will be doing the hiring and bring information to us. And so we're, even with all these difficulties, I think that the confluence of the highlighting of the health disparities that have occurred all over New York State, and we saw it blatantly in New York City, the courage of Black Lives Matter movement in New York City, the pushback regarding the need for police reform, etc. I guess I'm still a little bit of an optimist, and I feel like there's an incredible energy there that we just have to stay with, and we have to move it towards systemic change. And whether that's change at a local level, whether it's change in how we respond to services, whether it's change in what needs to be done in Albany, all of which needs more education. I, as an older white lesbian, am learning from our following, which is largely young people like yourselves teaching us. So I think the intergenerational thing does have value, because some of us older have resources, etc., and Rolodexes. Who the hell has a Rolodex anymore? But contacts. But we need to learn and understand the current issues to move the ball. So this is very growthful, very helpful. I really, really thank you. And we are continue our discussion to be hearing from Rochester. And hopefully at some point we'll be on the ground, one of you on the ground, continuing to inform us about how we could be meaningfully helpful. Thank you. Thank you. So in 2 weeks, any of you are invited to join our virtual town hall in Buffalo. Ahmed, did you want to say something? Or?
I think you've said it very well. I just want to second everything Cynthia said, and wish everyone a good night. This has been amazing. It's been recorded. I'll be posting it on our website tomorrow, and so you guys will be able to share it with your networks. And so thank you guys. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.